Most people believe the way to deal with toxic people is to explain themselves better, set the record straight, or finally say the perfect thing that makes the other person understand. That rarely works, because toxicity isn't a misunderstanding, it's a pattern. And once you recognize that, your strategy changes. Toxic people don't communicate to connect. They communicate to control, to provoke emotion, to pull you into reaction. The moment you react emotionally, they win. Not because they're right, but because they've gained access to your energy. The most powerful way to deal with toxic people is not confrontation, it's not proving your point. It's emotional disengagement paired with clear boundaries. Calm is not weakness here. Calm is insulation. When you stop reacting, you stop rewarding the behavior. Notice how toxic dynamics survive. They survive on explanations, on arguments, on you trying to be understood. But clarity doesn't come from explaining yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you. That's where boundaries come in. Boundaries don't require speeches. They don't require justification. They don't require approval. A boundary is simply a decision about what you will and will not participate in. Short, clear, calm. The less you explain, the stronger the boundary becomes. Toxic people push back hardest when they feel access closing. That pushback is not a sign you're wrong. It's a sign the boundary is working. Detachment is often misunderstood as coldness. It isn't. Detachment is choosing not to personalize behavior. That was never about you to begin with. You don't detach to punish, you detach to protect. Silence becomes powerful here. Not silent treatment, silence with intention. You stop filling the space, you stop defending, you stop responding to bait. And something interesting happens. Without emotional fuel, toxic behavior collapses under its own weight. They either escalate or disengage. Both outcomes restore your control. You are not required to attend every argument you're invited to. You are not obligated to fix people who refuse self-reflection. And you are not responsible for managing someone else's emotional regulation. Self-respect changes the entire dynamic. When you respect yourself, you stop negotiating your peace. You don't announce this shift. You embody it. Your tone stays even. Your words stay minimal. Your boundaries stay firm. And over time, toxic people stop targeting you. Not because you fought harder, but because you became unavailable to manipulation. The most powerful way to deal with toxic people is not to beat them at their game. It's to stop playing entirely. Calm, clear, unavailable. That's not avoidance. That's strength. Toxic behavior is about control, not communication. At first glance, toxic interactions often look like misunderstandings, personality clashes, or poor communication skills. It's easy to believe that if you could just explain yourself more clearly, choose better words, or stay calmer, the situation would improve. But this assumption misses the core issue. Toxic behavior is rarely driven by a desire to understand or be understood. It is driven by a need to dominate, influence, or destabilize. True communication seeks clarity. It allows space for listening, reflection, and mutual adjustment. Control does the opposite. Control narrows the conversation. It provokes emotional responses, distorts facts, and shifts focus away from resolution and toward power. When someone repeatedly ignores context, escalates minor issues, or twists your words, they are not failing to communicate. They are exerting control. One of the clearest signs of this is how toxic people respond when you stay calm. Instead of meeting calm with calm, they often intensify, volume increases. Accusations sharpen. The goal is no longer the topic at hand, it's to pull you out of balance. Emotional reaction becomes leverage. The moment you react defensively, they gain influence over the interaction. This is why logic rarely works in toxic exchanges. Logical explanations assume a shared goal of understanding. Toxic behavior operates under a different goal entirely. The aim is not to resolve the issue, but to keep you engaged, unsettled, or self-doubting. Confusion serves that aim, clarity threatens it. Control also shows up in moving goalposts. No matter how clearly you respond, the issue changes. What was acceptable yesterday is suddenly unacceptable today. Apologies are dismissed. Boundaries are challenged. This constant shifting keeps you off balance and searching for the right response. The search itself becomes the trap. Another hallmark of control-driven behavior is selective listening. Toxic individuals often hear only what supports their narrative. They ignore explanations that don't serve them and latch onto fragments they can twist. This isn't misunderstanding, it's strategic attention. By controlling what is acknowledged, they control the emotional direction of the exchange. Toxic behavior also thrives on repetition. The same conflicts replay with different details but identical dynamics. This repetition is not accidental. It reinforces hierarchy. Each cycle drains energy and reinforces the idea that you must keep proving, defending, or fixing. Control strengthens as you exhaust yourself trying to restore balance. Importantly, toxic behavior does not always look aggressive. It can appear passive, subtle, or even polite. Sarcasm, guilt, withdrawal, and feigned confusion can all serve the same controlling function. The common thread is not tone but outcome. If you consistently feel smaller, more confused, or more responsible after interactions, control is at work. Understanding that toxicity is about control changes your response. You stop trying to persuade. You stop over-explaining. You recognize that more communication will not create clarity because clarity is not the goal. This realization is freeing. It allows you to shift from engagement to boundaries. Boundaries disrupt control because they remove access. They don't argue, they don't negotiate, they simply define limits. Control requires participation. Boundaries withdraw it. This is why toxic individuals often react strongly to boundaries. They feel the loss of influence. Calm detachment is not indifference, it is strategic awareness. It acknowledges the pattern without internalizing it. When you remain calm and limit engagement, you stop providing the emotional fuel that control depends on. The interaction loses momentum. Silence can also be revealing. When you stop responding, the intent becomes clearer. Control-driven behavior often escalates when ignored, exposing its true nature. This escalation is not your fault. It is evidence of the underlying dynamic. Recognizing control also protects your self-perception. Toxic interactions often leave you questioning yourself. Was I unclear? Did I overreact? Did I cause this? Understanding the motive behind the behavior interrupts that self-doubt. You realize that the confusion was not accidental. It was part of the dynamic. Ultimately, seeing toxic behavior for what it is allows you to reclaim agency. You stop trying to win conversations and start protecting your energy. You choose where to engage and where to step back. Control loses power when it is no longer mistaken for communication. Emotional reactions feed toxic people. This is one of the most uncomfortable truths to accept because it forces a shift in how we see conflict. Most people believe emotional reactions are natural responses to disrespect, manipulation, or unfair treatment. And they are. But in toxic dynamics, those reactions don't just express feeling, they become fuel. They keep the cycle alive. Toxic people thrive on emotional engagement. Anger, frustration, defensiveness, guilt, even over-justification, all signal that they have reached you. That signal is power. It confirms influence. The content of your reaction matters far less than the fact that you reacted at all. Whether you argue, cry, explain, or lash out, the dynamic remains the same. Attention has been secured. This is why toxic interactions often feel draining rather than productive. There is motion without progress. Energy is spent, but nothing resolves. Emotional reactions keep the focus on managing feelings instead of addressing patterns. And patterns are where the real issue lies. One reason emotional reactions are so effective for toxic individuals is predictability. Once they learn what triggers you, they can pull that lever repeatedly. Tone changes, subtle insults, dismissive comments, these are not random. They are tests. Each test checks how easily your emotional state can be shifted. When it works, the behavior is reinforced. Emotional reactions also shift the narrative. When you react strongly, attention moves away from the original behavior and toward your response. You become the problem. Overreacting, or dramatic. This reversal protects the toxic behavior and puts you on defense. Control is reestablished through confusion. Defensiveness is especially feeding. Explaining yourself assumes the other person is seeking understanding. In toxic dynamics, that assumption becomes a vulnerability. Each explanation gives them more material to distort, dismiss, or weaponize. The more you try to clarify, the deeper you're pulled in. Even calm emotional reactions can feed toxicity if they involve over-engagement. Repeated attempts to reason, soothe, or fix can still serve the same function. They show availability. Toxic people don't always want conflict, they want access. Any reaction that keeps the interaction going provides that access. This doesn't mean suppressing emotion or pretending not to feel. It means choosing where emotion is expressed. Processing emotions privately or with safe people protects your clarity. Expressing them directly into a toxic dynamic often undermines it. When emotional reactions stop, something important happens. The dynamic loses momentum. Without emotional payoff, the toxic behavior becomes ineffective. This is why detachment is often met with escalation. The behavior intensifies because the usual reward is missing. This escalation is not a failure of detachment. It is proof that the strategy worked. Non-reaction also reveals intent. When there is no emotional response to manipulate, the controlling nature of the behavior becomes visible. The interaction no longer hides behind misunderstanding or passion. It stands exposed. Choosing not to react emotionally is an act of self-protection, not passivity. It requires awareness and discipline. It means noticing the urge to respond and choosing a different path. That choice preserves energy and restores agency. Over time, this shift changes patterns. Toxic people either adapt, escalate, or disengage. All three outcomes move you closer to control. You are no longer pulled into cycles that leave you depleted. Understanding that emotional reactions feed toxic people reframes responsibility. You are not responsible for their behavior, but you are responsible for your participation. Withdrawing emotional fuel doesn't fix them, but it frees you. And that freedom is where real power begins. Boundaries matter more than explanations. This truth challenges one of the most common instincts people have when faced with difficult or toxic behavior. The instinct is to explain, to clarify intentions, to justify decisions, to hope that if the other person just understands, the behavior will change. But in many situations, especially unhealthy ones, explanations don't create respect. They create openings. Explanations assume goodwill. They assume the other person is listening with the intent to understand. Boundaries assume reality. They recognize that not everyone engages in good faith. When someone repeatedly ignores your needs, dismisses your feelings, or crosses lines you've already clarified, the issue is not lack of information. It's lack of respect. A boundary is not a debate. It's a decision. It doesn't require agreement to be valid. When you explain excessively, you invite negotiation. You signal that your limits are flexible, that they can be questioned, challenged, or worn down. Boundaries lose strength when they are treated like proposals instead of standards. Explanations also keep you emotionally invested. Each justification pulls you deeper into the interaction. You replay events, search for better phrasing, and wait for acknowledgement. This emotional labor benefits the person crossing the boundary, not you. It keeps the focus on their response instead of your well-being. Boundaries shift the focus inward. They are about what you will do, not what the other person should understand. This distinction is crucial. You cannot control someone else's behavior, but you can control your participation. Boundaries make that control visible. Another reason boundaries are more effective is clarity. A clear boundary leaves little room for interpretation. It defines consequences, not expectations. Expla, by contrast, often muddy the water. They introduce emotion, history, and nuance that can be exploited or dismissed. Clarity removes confusion. Many people fear boundaries because they worry they will seem harsh or unfair. This fear often leads to over-explaining. But firmness and cruelty are not the same. Boundaries can be calm, respectful, and kind without being negotiable. Kindness does not require self-abandonment. Explanations can also be used against you. In unhealthy dynamics, personal details, vulnerabilities, and reasoning are sometimes stored and later weaponized. Boundaries protect that information. They limit access to your inner world. This protection is not secrecy, it is discernment. Boundaries also teach others how to treat you. When you consistently enforce limits without lengthy explanation, you communicate self-respect. People adjust their behavior based on what is allowed, not what is explained. Repetition of boundaries, not repetition of reasons, creates change. Importantly, boundaries must be followed by action. A boundary without enforcement becomes a suggestion. This is where many people struggle. They explain the boundary but hesitate to act when it's crossed. Action completes the boundary. It shows that your words align with your behavior. This doesn't mean cutting people off at the first mistake. It means responding consistently. When boundaries are crossed, the response is predictable and calm. No speeches, no debates. Just follow through. Over time, this consistency builds credibility. Boundaries also reduce resentment. When you stop explaining and start enforcing, you stop carrying the emotional burden of hoping others will change. You accept reality as it is and act accordingly. This acceptance brings relief. Ultimately, boundaries matter more than explanations because they protect your energy and preserve your dignity. They do not rely on others' understanding to be effective. They stand on your commitment to yourself. And that commitment is what creates lasting change. Calm detachment is power. It is not indifference, coldness, or emotional avoidance. It is the ability to stay steady without being pulled into chaos that isn't yours to carry. Most people misunderstand detachment because they confuse it with distance from care, when in reality it is distance from control, manipulation, and unnecessary emotional drain. When you are emotionally reactive, you are easy to influence. Your mood can be shifted by a comment, a tone, or a look. Calm detachment removes that leverage. It doesn't mean you feel nothing. It means you choose what deserves your emotional investment. This choice is where real power begins. Detachment allows you to observe instead of absorb. Instead of immediately internalizing someone else's behavior, you notice it, you see patterns. You recognize when a reaction is being provoked. This awareness gives you time, and time gives you options. Power often lives in the pause between stimulus and response. People who thrive on drama or control depend on emotional engagement. They need reactions to feel significant. Calm detachment starves that need. When there is no emotional fuel, the dynamic changes. You are no longer predictable. You are no longer easy to pull off center. Detachment also protects clarity. Strong emotions narrow perspective. When you're calm and slightly removed, you can see the situation as it is, not as it feels in the moment. You can separate facts from assumptions, intentions from impact. This clarity leads to better decisions. Another overlooked strength of detachment is self-respect. When you don't chase validation, explanations, or closure from people who can't offer it, you send a clear message to yourself: your peace matters. That internal alignment builds quiet confidence. You stop proving. You start standing. Calm detachment is especially powerful in conflict. Raised voices invite raised voices. Accusations invite defenses. Detachment interrupts this cycle. A calm presence in a tense moment often shifts the entire room. Even when it doesn't change the other person, it changes you, and that is what you can control. Detachment does not mean tolerating disrespect. In fact, it strengthens boundaries. When you're emotionally detached, you enforce limits without anger or guilt. You don't need to convince or persuade. You simply act. This consistency is far more effective than emotional appeals. Many people fear detachment because they think it will make them less human. The opposite is true. It makes your emotions intentional instead of reactive. You feel deeply where it matters and remain steady where it doesn't. This balance is emotional maturity. Calm detachment also reduces exhaustion. Emotional over-involvement is draining. Caring too much about things outside your control leads to burnout. Detachment conserves energy. It allows you to show up fully for what truly deserves you. Over time, detachment rewires how others relate to you. People sense when they cannot easily provoke you. Some will respect it. Some will resist it. Either way, you gain clarity about who belongs in your life and in what capacity. Ultimately, calm detachment is power because it places your emotional state back in your hands. It frees you from being controlled by external behavior. It allows you to move through life grounded, observant, and self-directed. When you are calm and unattached to outcomes you cannot control, you become unshakable. You don't owe access to everyone. This idea can feel uncomfortable at first because many of us are taught that being kind means being available, accommodating, and open at all times. We learn early that saying yes is polite, that explaining ourselves is respectful, and that allowing people close is a sign of maturity. But over time, this belief quietly drains energy, blurs identity, and creates resentment. Access is not a basic right others have to you. It is a privilege you grant based on trust, respect, and alignment. Access means more than physical presence. It includes emotional availability, mental space, time, and influence. When someone has access to you, they can affect your mood, your thoughts, and your sense of self. Treating this lightly is costly. Not everyone who wants closeness is safe with it, and not everyone who asks deserves it. Recognizing this is not selfish, it is discerning. Many people confuse boundaries with rejection. Limiting access does not mean you dislike someone or wish them harm. It simply means you understand your capacity. You are allowed to decide who gets to hear your vulnerabilities, who gets your immediate replies, who gets your patience, and who gets your silence. These decisions shape your inner life far more than most realize. Overexposure often leads to self-betrayal. When you give too much access too quickly, you begin adjusting yourself to maintain harmony. You filter your words, suppress discomfort, and overextend emotionally to avoid tension. Slowly, you move away from your own center. Boundaries are what prevent this erosion. They allow connection without loss of self. Some people react strongly when access is limited. They may accuse you of changing, becoming distant, or being difficult. What they often mean is that you are no longer as available to meet their expectations. Discomfort from others is not evidence that your boundary is wrong. It is often evidence that the boundary was needed. You do not owe everyone an explanation for your limits. Explaining can be useful when there is mutual respect, but when explanations turn into negotiations, access is being demanded, not requested. A boundary does not require agreement to be valid. It only requires clarity and consistency. Protecting access also protects growth. When you are building something meaningful in your life, whether confidence, discipline, healing, or purpose, not everyone can come with you. Some people are attached to earlier versions of you. Limiting access creates space for evolution. It allows you to invest in what strengthens you instead of constantly managing reactions. Emotional availability is especially important to guard. Being open with the wrong people leads to minimization, dismissal, or misuse of your honesty. Vulnerability should be met with care, not curiosity or control. Choosing who gets to see that side of you is an act of self-respect. Access should be reciprocal, not transactional. If you consistently give energy, attention, and understanding while receiving tension, guilt, or instability, the imbalance will eventually cost you. Boundaries restore equilibrium. They are not walls, they are filters. It is also important to understand that access can change over time. Someone who once had full access may need to have less as circumstances shift. This is not betrayal, it is adjustment. Life is dynamic and healthy relationships adapt rather than demand permanence. Limiting access sharpens discernment. You begin noticing how people respond to your boundaries. Those who respect them often value you as a person. Those who push against them often value what they can extract. This clarity is invaluable. When you stop offering unlimited access, you reclaim authority over your inner world. You decide when to engage and when to step back. You stop feeling responsible for managing everyone else's comfort. This creates a calm strength that doesn't need to announce itself. Ultimately, access is one of your most valuable resources. Treating it intentionally changes how you relate to others and how you relate to yourself. When you honor your limits, you teach people how to treat you without saying a word. Silence can be a strategic response. In a world that rewards speed, volume, and constant reaction, choosing not to speak is often misunderstood. Silence is mistaken for weakness, avoidance, or submission. In reality, silence is one of the most controlled and intentional responses available. It is not the absence of strength, but the presence of discipline. When used deliberately, silence protects clarity, preserves power, and reshapes dynamics without a single word being spoken. Most conflicts escalate not because of the original issue, but because of what follows it. A comment is made, a tone is perceived, and the reflex to defend, explain, or correct takes over. Words stack on words, emotion builds on emotion, and the situation grows larger than it ever needed to be. Silence interrupts this cycle. It creates a pause where escalation expected acceleration. That interruption alone can change the entire direction of an interaction. Silence denies impulsive people the fuel they seek. Many confrontations are not about resolution, they are about reaction. When someone provokes, criticizes, or pushes, they are often testing whether they can control your emotional state. A rapid response confirms that they can. Silence removes that leverage. It signals that your inner state is not easily accessed and that you choose when and how to engage. Strategic silence also gives you time, which is the most underrated advantage in communication. Time allows emotion to settle and perspective to return. What feels urgent in the moment often looks trivial with distance. By not responding immediately, you protect yourself from saying something you will later need to explain, soften, or regret. Silence keeps options open, words close them. There is also authority in restraint. People who speak constantly are easier to read, predict, and manipulate. People who speak selectively command attention when they do. Silence makes others lean in. It forces them to sit with their own words, assumptions, and discomfort. Often, people reveal far more when you allow space than when you rush to fill it. Silence is not avoidance when it is intentional. Avoidance is driven by fear. Strategic silence is driven by choice. The difference lies in awareness. When you are silent because you are overwhelmed, it drains you. When you are silent because you are centered, it strengthens you. One is retreat, the other is positioning. In emotionally charged situations, silence prevents identity erosion. When attacked personally, the instinct is to defend your character, explain your intentions, or prove your worth. This is rarely effective. Defending yourself places the attacker in the position of judge. Silence refuses that frame. It communicates that your sense of self is not up for debate. Silence also exposes the quality of the other person's communication. When you stop responding, some people calm down, reflect, and adjust. Others escalate, repeat themselves, or become louder. This tells you everything you need to know. The response to your silence reveals whether the person is seeking understanding or control. In professional environments, silence can be especially powerful. Not every comment in a meeting deserves immediate agreement or correction. Pausing before responding signals thoughtfulness and confidence. It shows that you are processing, not reacting. Often, others will fill the silence by clarifying, correcting themselves, or adding context, reducing the need for you to speak at all. Silence also protects emotional energy. Constant engagement, especially with negative or reactive people, drains focus and well-being. You are not required to attend every argument you are invited to. Choosing silence is choosing conservation. It allows you to invest energy where it actually matters rather than where it is demanded the loudest. It is important to recognize that silence is most effective when paired with consistency. Random silence confuses. Intentional silence teaches. When people learn that provocation does not earn access, behavior often changes. You are not training others with lectures. You are training them with absence of reward. Silence does not mean you never speak. It means you speak from clarity instead of impulse. When you do respond after silence, your words land differently. They are measured, grounded, and harder to dismiss. Silence sharpens language by reducing its frequency. There is also self-respect in silence. It reflects an understanding that not everything requires your input. Some conversations do not deserve your energy. Some misunderstandings resolve themselves when you step back. Some truths do not need defending. Silence allows these realities to surface. Ultimately, strategic silence is about control of self, not control of others. It is choosing composure over chaos, clarity over clutter, and intention over impulse. When you master silence, you no longer feel pressured to fill space, prove points, or win every exchange. You move through interactions with steadiness, knowing that your power is not in how quickly you respond, but in your ability to choose if you respond at all. Self-respect is the ultimate protection. It is quieter than confidence, firmer than boundaries, and deeper than self-esteem. Confidence can rise and fall depending on circumstances. Boundaries can be tested. Self-respect, however, is the internal line you do not cross even when no one is watching, even when it would be easier to compromise. It is the internal agreement that you will treat yourself with the dignity you expect from others. When self-respect is present, many external problems lose their power. Disrespect, manipulation, and toxicity thrive on uncertainty and self-doubt. They gain traction when someone is unsure of their own worth or afraid of losing approval. Self-respect removes that vulnerability. It does not make you aggressive or defensive. It makes you unmovable. You no longer need to fight for dignity because you are anchored in it. Self-respect changes how you interpret behavior. Instead of asking, "What did I do wrong?" you begin asking, "Is this acceptable to me?" That shift is subtle but life-altering. You stop internalizing poor treatment and start evaluating it. This evaluation creates emotional distance, which protects you from absorbing energy that was never meant to be yours. People with self-respect do not rush to explain themselves. Over-explaining is often an attempt to earn understanding or permission. Self-respect assumes understanding is optional. You are willing to clarify, but you are not willing to plead. This calm refusal to beg for validation sends a powerful signal your worth is not negotiable. Self-respect also governs what you tolerate in silence. It does not mean you confront every issue, but it means you notice every one. You do not excuse patterns that harm you. You do not minimize your discomfort to keep the peace. Peace that costs self-respect is not peace, it is compliance. When self-respect is intact, peace begins internally and extends outward. In relationships, self-respect acts as an early warning system. It alerts you when dynamics become unbalanced, when effort becomes one-sided, or when kindness is conditional. Instead of waiting for resentment to build, self-respect prompts adjustment. Sometimes that adjustment is a conversation. Sometimes it is distance. Either way, the decision is guided by self-honoring, not fear. Self-respect also protects your time. You begin to recognize that time is not just a resource but a reflection of values. Where you invest your time is where you invest your life. Saying no becomes less emotional and more practical. You are not rejecting people, you are prioritizing alignment. This clarity reduces guilt because your decisions are rooted in principle, not impulse. Emotionally, self-respect stabilizes you. You are less reactive because your identity is not constantly on trial. Criticism stings less because you are not outsourcing your self-image. Praise feels lighter because you are not dependent on it. You operate from internal validation, which is steadier than any external approval. Self-respect also influences how others treat you, often without a word being spoken. People sense when someone will not tolerate disrespect, not because they are intimidating, but because they are grounded. There is a calm firmness in how they speak, pause, and decide. This presence discourages manipulation before it even begins. Importantly, self-respect is built through small, consistent choices. It is choosing rest when you are exhausted instead of pushing for approval. It is telling the truth gently instead of lying for comfort. It is leaving situations that diminish you, even when staying would be easier in the short term. Each choice reinforces the internal message that you matter. Self-respect does not make you rigid or unkind. It makes you clear. You can be compassionate without being compliant. You can be understanding without self-abandonment. You can forgive without reconnecting. These distinctions protect both your heart and your integrity. When self-respect is absent, protection is sought externally through control, people-pleasing, or avoidance. When self-respect is present, protection becomes internal and automatic. You no longer need to armor yourself against the world. You simply stop giving access where it is not earned. Over time, self-respect simplifies life. Decisions become cleaner. Relationships become healthier or fall away. Inner conflict reduces because your actions align with your values. You experience fewer regrets not because life becomes perfect, but because you remain loyal to yourself through it. Ultimately, self-respect is the ultimate protection because it cannot be taken from you. It does not depend on circumstances, relationships, or outcomes. It travels with you into every conversation, every decision, and every season of life. When you have self-respect, you are never truly unprotected, because you are always standing on your own side.